Detective Comics 1034, Mariko Tamaki writing with Dan Mora on art. This is the start of the run. We're introduced to some supporting cast members. We're given, the status quo. This is, well, Batman's dealing with Batman's relationship with various other Bat characters. This is very much just Batman on his own, living in, admittedly, quite a fancy, expensive area. But still,
I would say that Batman's the Gotham book, and this is the Bruce Wayne book.
Sure, that's fair. But this is, actually dealing with him living in an apartment. Now, it's admittedly he's still with Gotham's elite, which just shows you how separate he was, having his own mansion.
Yeah. He went from I don't know where the really wealthy people live in New York, but I do know the ones that live in the city live in certain areas. Yeah. So he went from where the really wealthy live out in big mansions to the moderately wealthy.
Yes,
in the city,
the nice area. Yeah,
yeah, and I like Tamaki's entire vibe of describing Gotham through these people. Turns out Tamaki's a really good writer, right?
Yeah, Tamaki is really good. It's this book sets up some interesting stuff with some new characters. Neil particularly, name sticks out, but it has some other interesting kind of setup. I do love when a run gets a supporting cast. But this also seems to be the book that might most directly deal with the mayor stuff. Mayor Nakano, who's heavily featured in this book. Some of the characters that are interested are also kind of related to his office. But we have, Bruce is at a fundraiser or some sort of party.
He's at a fundraising type event where all of Gotham's elite are there, at least partially.
Yeah. And he's there just listening to what's going on, but some clowns show up, some remnants of the Joker War, basically. So Bruce has to run off. So some great action pages here, particularly when Batman dives back in. It was a really good panel, actually, I thought, of... I think some of the staff hiding under a table. Or maybe some
really
of the guests.
Heavily shadowed.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good panel.
Yeah, it was gorgeous, that panel.
Yeah. It really sold the fear of them. But you have the bickering from the mayor's people, Neil, who's the head of security, wanting to leave, and Nakano being no, I'm staying here till everyone's safe. But I do kind of like the final beat of this, because they've set up the Nakano whole anti-vigilante thing so well that at the end of this scene was okay, the situation's been contained, but sir, it wasn't the SWAT team, it was Batman secured the room.
And he's God damn it.
Yeah. So I like that the themes are really well thought out. Also, Bruce finally realized what he'd put Alfred through all those years, making him work in a cave. Because he's trying to build his own mini bat caves.
His cave was a lot nicer.
Yes.
Yeah. He's literally in a mud pit. That's where Bruce's new cave is. Under these tunnels in Gotham that have been basically condemned. And that's, I think, some really good Moore art too. We know Moore is really good at the actiony stuff, but here, Bruce toiling away in the I feel his physical presence. The ache and the pain.
Something that always seems to. I mean, obviously, this isn't all on Moore, unless he colored it himself, but I don't think he did. But
I think Belair does the colors on this.
Yeah. But I always feel like his art is accompanied by really strong color direction, and what I mean by that is that the party has a lot of reds, but particularly when the fighting starts. But then when you go to the tunnels, it's a lot of muted greens. So it's a very distinct thing where as soon as you turn the page, because there's some comics where I feel like, and it's not that the art's bad per se, but there are some comics where it just feels like 20 pages of constant lines and info, right? Constant stuff. Right. Whereas this, you turn the page and there's just no question you're in a different location, you're in a different part of the world, different part of the city.
It really plays with the tone and the mood.
Yeah.
This vibe in the tunnel where it's all these greens and yellows and shadows is completely different than the boardroom that's a lot of red.
Yeah.
Even just on that page, you have the above ground shots on both those pages in the cave. They're a little bit, and it's just it's natural light. It's kind of pleasant, smooth, warm colors, and then it cuts to the greens and the blacks underground, and it's just so different.
Yeah, and then you go to the his new street, and it's all the warm orange of the street lights, and it's a very different, very sort of sandy tones and whatnot. The building and the brick and whatever.
Yeah, Belair's really great at this stuff.
Yeah, And we're interested, so we get this, this socialite woman who comes up and is like, "Hey, Bruce, you have to come to this party." And he's like, she's really overly friendly. She's hugging him. In fact, honestly, the facial expression on Bruce as he's been hugged from behind is one of my favorite little bits of art in this.
He's like, "How lovely is this?" And he's just there going, "Lovely."
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I feel you, bro. I've never related to Bruce Wayne more than that one panel.
I do love her in like a nosy neighbor kind of way. Like she's so annoying, she's endearing.
When I say I hate her, I mean that in a very good way. In that, I hate that type of person naturally.
Yeah,
like I just cannot
a happy
get on
person. Connor hates happy people.
I hate people with too much energy.
I instantly got her vibe and how much that contrasts with Bruce never having to have neighbors, and now this is the neighbor he has. And it's a nice little twist in the Bat mythos.
Yeah. If I even mentions his narration, this is the first time he's probably ever had neighbors, really, because he's always been at the mansion. So we meet a bunch of different characters. Notably, there's a couple with the rich wife, Sarah Worth, and her husband, who's like sort of like basically just leeches money off of her. Not I mean, they seem to like each other, but it mentions that he's on his third startup in as many years, so presumably it's her money that he's wasting
burning through
constantly.
Yeah.
The last good journalist in Gotham, who of course hates Bruce, which pleases him.
Makes sense, right?
I thought so. The woman who's shown him around, Lydia. If there's anything with the art, and it's not so much a complaint, more of an observation, is at the end of that page where she's introducing people. And she says, "Let's drink." She looks like she's been infected with Joker toxin. The way that the smile is to me.
You can tell Pete hasn't been to many parties.
I just feel like she's because they're not in the suburbs, but is that suburban wife? It's wine time.
Exactly. It's like, it's time. Let's get the party started.
We get it. You love your booze, but no. But I get what Pete's saying too. It is a little bit over the top.
It's over exaggerated, but
it did work for me.
Yeah. Wait, so now Connor's relating to her because she wants booze. Is that what we're saying? Yes.
No, I just drink when I want to. I don't have to make a big deal about it. I just pour myself something.
Every day?
Most days. I don't have no problem with that.
I don't have a drink problem. I love drinking all the time.
It's not a problem if I'm only having like one glass.
It's not a problem if I'm enjoying it.
It's not a problem as long as I can afford to keep buying it.
I can count the amount of times I have been drunk in the last year on one hand.
Yes, but you saw that one hand 3 times.
No, legitimately, I don't get drunk very often.
Okay.
Very defensive. That's all I'm saying.
I am defensive because it is very healthy, appropriate drinking, and it's not my fault that you don't drink a damn thing.
All right.
Anyway, yes, on the party. Yes. Basically, Bruce talks about how these elite, like they talk about what's happening in the city. Oh, it's terrible. All the crimes happen in the city, but they live in this little cornered off rich area. It's just stories from a distance. What does he say? It's not a fire. It's a slight ember or something he calls it to them.
Candlelight.
Candlelight. That's what it was.
Yeah, it's a candlelight to a fire, and I love that. I love that. Like, sure, Joker War happened in Gotham, but it really didn't touch them because they're so, they have that wealth provides a wall around them.
Yeah,
and I can almost see the commentary of Tamaki going, "Hey, this is kind of how, the magistrate gets in, right? Is everyone should have that wall." And that's once it affects them, then they can start using their influence to change things. Because we get with the mayor in his office, and they're talking about the same kind of stuff,
Yeah. He basically they're looking for a scapegoat for why all this happened, and someone said we should blame the head of security, and then Neil, who's the head of security, is like, "What? That's bullshit! I told you to leave. This was not what I said." And Batman's looking into the gang who showed up, and of course he tracks down some of them, and they're basically a bunch of idiots that he takes out fairly quickly. But the big thing that happens towards the end of the main story here is that the rich wife with the startup guy, she's like, someone chaps her door and she opens it and she's kind of sleepy. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, she says. And it cuts, there's a black panel at the bottom sort of indicating sort of a lights out. And Bruce is just going home the next day and he hears like commotion and screaming, and the husband has come home and he's like, my wife is missing, there's broken glass all everywhere, something's happened here, something's wrong. And the last page we just see this guy Neil, who was mentioned, by the way. Neil is Lydia's husband, even though we never see them interact really in the issue, but she mentions her husband Neil works for the mayor, and then we see of course Neil and the mayor stuff, but we just see him walking down notably a sewer with the same colouring that we saw earlier on when Bruce was down there. And I'm not saying that he's going to find a Batcave or anything. I think just thematically the idea that he's also part of the underbelly.
He's underneath.
So, but he's got blood all over his hands. So Neil's a bit unhinged, is what I'm going to say. And the final point Bruce makes in his narration is that maybe, the nightmare of Gotham has finally arrived at the elite's doorstep. So, there you go. That's
it's I don't want to say I like it more than the other Batman book, but I do say that because they're so different. But I feel like I like this vibe just a little bit more of the story Tamaki's telling.
I like how different they are, because this is kind of going back to when I complain about the same writer on two books, the same two books, like Superman in Action, for example, is that they tend to have a familiar feeling between them because it's one person. These could not feel more different between Detective and Batman, and that's why I like the most, because it's fine. You can like one or the other. You can like both. You can have preferences, and if you only like one, great. You've still got one book. You got good chances. And I think it's safe to say both are a pretty high quality right now.
Yeah, I mean, like, Tamaki, I've liked her work, so it wouldn't surprise me if I do end up liking this more. It makes sense that I would, to be honest. But yeah, I think the mystery is good. I think that I don't necessarily think that just because it's called Detective Comics, it has to be the one where Batman's more detective-y. That's something people always say is, Batman should be the action book and Detective should be the detective book. But I do think one of them should be detective-y. I don't really care which one it is, but this one does feel like it is a bit good, because there's literally a missing person. We know who's done it, seemingly, at least heavily implied, at least. But the idea that Bruce is investigating all these new neighbors, he's in an uncomfortable position where he's having to deal with all these new faces around him. It gives us like a sort of cast, and it's not quite a Agatha Christie people in a house style thing, but the idea
similar.
But think of the idea of the street and all these characters we've been introduced to that come to these parties. We have this set of cast that are going to pop up at least in this arc, if not the run, and I think that's an interesting vibe. But yeah, like I said, the coloring direction is really good. The way it makes each scene feel distinct, thematic stuff. I think Bruce's narration is pretty interesting. And I enjoyed the Future State issues that Tamaki did, but I think, like a lot of the stuff switching to the ongoing runs, I should say, seeing her just get to tell what is the start of her real sort of Batman story is very exciting. Yeah,
I think we all agreed that especially the Detective Comics Future State stuff felt like it wasn't really a full story. It was just here's like an idea, and it set out a template of where we're kind of heading and a tone, rather than telling an actual story. Whereas this here does feel like the start of a story for sure. That's just a bit more exciting.
Yeah. So yeah. It's very good. I suppose we should rate the main story before we move on to the backup. Matt, what are you giving this?
I'm gonna give this a solid 8.
Connor?
I think I'll agree with the 8.
8.5. Maybe a little bit more positive on it. We have the Robin backup, the Damian backup. I shouldn't really say Robin technically, even though the book's still going to be called Robin's something.
Yeah.
Whatever. Because he's technically not Robin right now.
So we talked last week about stuff feeling half an issue, right? I think that was the biggest problem with that. This backup is basically Robin issue 1, or you could say 0.
This was Robin issue 0 split into 2 parts.
Yeah.
Arbitrary
and
reasons.
And that's okay, because...
So what you're saying, Matt, is that this backup and this one felt like the second half of the issue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. Right? And okay, that's okay. I just wish I almost rather have gotten this as a 0 issue.
As a one part, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
because...
This could have been issue 1 of a Robin series. and it would have just functionally, before we get into it, would have flowed. It would have had your introduction, would have had your cliffhanger at the end. Everything about it would have worked exactly perfectly well as an issue.
Right. Because here it's a little bit confusing with how the last issue ended, right? Where there was that, a knife kind of deal.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what had happened. Here it's still not exactly as clear.
Yeah, it's basically just that they win. Like, Damien and Talia win.
Talia took the guy out herself by the look of it. And
but like
Damien just stands there watching.
Yeah, and that's the thing that gets me. It's like,
just before you go into the story stuff, I guess the one positive of being split in two like this is that technically it was cheaper. Technically, this would have been a $4 book if it was in one. As it is, it kind of cost $2 in a way.
I agree. I will say, but only if you were buying both of those books already.
True.
And I will say I will judge this potentially harsher after I read the first issue of the actual Robin series. And if I feel like this was essential, like if this doesn't do a good job of contextualizing and recapping, I will damn this a lot more. I
have some faith that it will feel like a proper issue one. Partly because this feels like it's setting up a concept, and all in the cliffhanger, it feels like they can start issue one, and we don't have to have it explained to us too much what a tournament is. We know a tournament.
No, I just want to say from where this picked up on, where I was going with it, it's that cliffhanger doesn't really pay off, right? Because we kind of get Talia handling things while Damien kind of watches. So I do feel
the
like
first page is just, Talia's got it.
Well, I guess that's kind of the point, though, is that if this is just an issue split in two, it wasn't a cliffhanger. It was just meant to be the page before the next page.
But that's just the way that it was handled. I feel like they knew they were going to split it. I don't feel like Williamson went.
Well, I wonder, did they know? Like when Williamson wrote this, was it already planned to be a split in two backup story?
That said, they knew it was going to be split into two, so you could have adjusted things just a little bit to make it a little bit more clear.
Know when it was written, it definitely adjusted a little bit because the page that was the last page in the first half functioned as a cliffhanger. And I think that would be too neat to happen on exactly page 10 if it wasn't planned that way. So I think they maybe re-edited the last couple of pages perhaps to make it flow into a cliffhanger.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying though. So they didn't know when they wrote it, so they patched in kind of an ending to the first half to make it feel more cliffhangery. Yeah. And then, but as a result, the start of the second half doesn't necessarily feel like it's the start of a story. It just feels kind of like, and I guess
jumping right in the middle of stuff happening.
And to be fair, I do think it's harder to make the start of this feel like the start of a issue than it is to make the ending of the last one feel like a cliffhanger. If that makes sense.
That's it. I wanted to pull a Connor, just get the negative out of the way because I really like the whole rest of this.
What I'll say I like about this is that I love that Talia casually mentions this tournament because she mentions the League of Lazarus. And how they were kind of the third, branch of all this, but they split away early on. But there's a tournament, the Lazarus tournament, and I love that the conversation continues for like a bubble or two or a panel or two, and then Damien goes, "Wait, did you say tournament?" And I'm like, Damien's been playing Mortal Kombat. He hears tournament. He wants to go to this thing.
I actually knew lettering as well. That bit, because it's right at the bottom of the page when he realizes, it comes back to that, as opposed to where it's the top of the page where the tournament's mentioned.
Right.
And it's like, it's all bold, of course, as you'd expect, but it also has this big red outline around the bubble, and one of the words is red as well. It really pops out, especially in such a shadowed panel.
I just love how he is playing up both sides of himself, right? So like he's talking like Batman, where this is a case.
He's like, I've studied everything. I know all of the details of our family. I was at the back computers for years. How could I not know about this? Why was it kept from me? It's like, hang on a second.
Wait, a tournament? What tournament? And then it plays to that part of him, and just Talia knows exactly what she's doing. Yeah, she is leading him along because she knows how to get what she wants, and I like here too that she talks about she almost has nothing left now because Leviathan was stolen from her, and it's almost like she's proclaiming to Damien, "This is our birthright as all goals," this tournament.
But one of the points as well here is that she's disappointed that he hesitated and didn't kill the guy right from the end of the first part. And I think it's important to mention that when she's, on the helicopter at the end and she's saying, "Hey, so you will, be one of my assassins, you will drop this bat foolery." But he does duck out. So it does feel like obviously
Batman's out of a helicopter.
Yeah, but it's not like he's just given up being Rob and now he's going full, League of Assassins Damien. It does kind of feel like what was being said earlier, the idea that he's kind of taking some qualities of both, but it doesn't seem like he's ready to just be a killer yet. But I will just say, everything about this tournament feels very Mortal Kombat. Like, and I'm thinking the Mortal Kombat movie specifically. There's a tournament somewhere. They have to get to, because when we get to, even though it says to be continued in Robin issue 1, there's a couple of epilogue pages to the back.
I mean, it does say also after that, but first.
Yes.
To make sure you turn the page if for whatever reason you weren't going to.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it'd be unreasonable, especially in a digital book where you don't really feel how many pages are left. If you just said, to be concluded in or to continue in, but there was no at first, I totally get why some people would just close the book. That.
Well,
I don't, because I need it to mark red, but.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
So that's where I read. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a fun way to end it. Like, because Pete says Mortal Kombat, I'm thinking Immortal Iron Fist, like that tournament between the 7 cities.
I had to bring it down in class here, but I mean, I'm bringing it down in class for the Mortal Kombat movie apparently. But there's also obviously things like you got to show some Hunger Games influence coming in as well.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I thought the young adults shit into this. What?
But
I said I was going to bring it down in class.
Yeah, how dare you bring young adult stuff into comics? There's no place for that here.
There's a tease.
I'm angry that they're addressing all things.
There's a tease that Rose is going to be in this tournament, which I'm all for.
We have Rose, one of the Batman Inc. Batmans, so I'm not sure who, but he looks like the I want to say one of the South American ones, just with the scarf.
No, they don't have. It could be, but they didn't tend to use the ears as much, did they?
No,
they did like the bandanas.
Like I do know him from that run. You know, he is in the Club of Heroes. You got Rose, and you got that new character they're bringing in that I forget her name. Looks like a tarantula down there at the bottom. But yeah, and so you're like, oh, these are all like the best hand-to-hand combatants, minus Cass, right? Because we all know she would win. So we can't put her there.
She's too good for this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's too good.
I don't want to tell her about it. They want to have a fighting chance.
And I'm like, who is this that they're talking up? Because now we go back to the League of Lazarus. Or no, this is the League of Shadows.
This is League of Shadows, yeah. Because they're hoping to beat the League of Lazarus. And so their fighter, because they're talking about Damien going in, he's been trained by the bat, he may be good enough. And then they start teasing the close-ups of the fists and the feet. And it's like, no, who better to kill a bird, to kill a robin, than a hawk?
What?
I mean, I knew that we were getting someone that we knew was going to be in this series because we talked about the cover they redacted it, right, with the which. But
if you said you knew it was going to be Hunter Hawk, I'm going to call BS.
Yeah, not a chance would I have guessed that.
Which. On a meta level, I just love because they are both the bastard sons of Ollie and Bruce, right? And they both kind of serve that purpose of being the not like their father.
They need to kind of learn to be better.
Right. Whereas I feel like their inverses or if that's the right word, of each other, where traditionally Connor Hawk was, raised in a monastery and he's not hot-headed and he's the opposite of his dad, and so when he meets Ollie, it's this whole type thing, right? That how can I be descended from someone so different from me? Where Damien's the opposite with Bruce, right? Where he was raised, as a killer and he has to learn to not be that. And now we're going to put them on opposite ends of the tournament. And, oh, man.
It's going to be the finals. Connor Hawk's going to be the one trying to sweep the leg at the end, right?
Really? I mean, is he though? Or is he Danielson?
Are you suggesting Damien's the villain?
I think it's possible, and given the context here.
Okay, if anybody's gonna go to Cobra Kai, it's Damien, not Connor Hawk.
Well, but to be fair though, this is the League of Shadows that are putting Connor Hawk out of the tournament. That's hardly a good place to be coming from.
And so, on top of all of that as well, Connor Hawk's been gone a very long time. He disappeared during New 52. And even before that, I remember reading his book, like way back, and yeah. So he's been gone a very long time. The fact that he's still around, I love. I love that now. It seems like despite not having a book for a long time, the Green Arrow family is on the rise.
Yeah,
you know,
I think it shows that our generation of readers are kind of getting up there now. And by that I mean, people who love that, early to mid 2000s DC comics, kind of, which is where we all like love that stuff.
I got that feeling from Tom Taylor, which I don't know how old Tom Taylor is, but I'll say he's kind of in our generation.
I think he's a fan of that period. I feel it from him. I feel it from Tynan. I feel it from Williamson.
Yeah.
Like, they all have like these similar things of, okay, we love a lot of these same characters that were popular at that period.
This happens with everything when you get the creators start being the same age as you, right? And I'm not just bringing up wrestling tonight, Connor, but one of the weird things that someone pointed out this week that I felt was that Tony Khan, who runs AEW, he's a fan of a certain generation that's fairly close to ours. So a lot of the weird things he does in references and stuff, or the songs that he'll buy the rights to, which he did again this week for Orange Cassidy. It feels like
Pixie song.
You got a Pixie song, yeah. Like, it feels like, oh wait, someone of my not crowd, my
it's like your cohort or your generation. Like, it's
one of my peers is in charge now, and all of a sudden it feels more relevant to me than it ever has. And maybe that's the same thing that's happening here, where a lot of these creators that we're really starting to love now, like Tynan and Taylor,
like, like, was it a cheap pop to throw Connor Hawk there at the end for someone like me? Absolutely. But the story that they're telling here with How Do You Kill a Robin, but with a hawk, the story stuff there justifies them, besides going, hey, look, you remember Connor Hawk? He's here now. It's like, no, Williamson has a plan for this, and I'm here for it. Like, I remember being kind of negative on, oh, why are we getting a Robin backup? And then they announced the series, right? And then as soon as they announced that series, I was in. And now I'm doubly even more. Like, if I had any doubts, this backup.
Yeah, I still think this should have just been a first issue. But other than that, I do like the content that's here.
Yeah.
Just like the presentation, the split.
And Melkit, I can never say his name all the way. Yeah, that guy. His art, I think it's so, like, I love the solid lines and almost the blockiness. It adds to the action, and it also reminds me of that era that we're talking about, that it seems like Williamson and Tynan and Taylor, that was the art style of the time. Almost McGinnis-y, but not quite. It's a little bit more refined than that.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with that. Sure. I think it's exciting for us as fans of that period where, okay, our peers are there, and absolutely does happen in other industries. I think it's notable that for comics we're here now, because we were kind of edging towards it when Snyder took over Batman. It was very clear he was a big fan of the animated series.
Yeah.
And obviously that was quite a bit earlier in terms of the timeline as to the comic specific stuff. But it was like, okay, we're starting to get to stuff that we recognize. But I think now we're really entering that period proper, for us at least. Your mileage may vary depending on when you started reading comics. You may have a little bit left to wait.
Yeah, which probably means we have a good decade or so ahead of us in terms of stuff appealing to us specifically.
You would hope so.
Yeah.
But I mean, just look at also what Tynan did with Detective. We kept talking about how much that felt like.
Actually, I just realized something. Does that mean in 10 years' time, like, we're going to have people who grew up in the New 52 writing comics, and they're going to be like, there's reference back to the Callers.
I will be firmly out, so we're good.
This is the, I think, I think this is Morrison's theory from his Supergods book, the 22-year cycle, where you've got 11 with a midpoint 11 years of, you go through things being like, poppy and cheery and funny, and then on the other end of the scale is like the grim dark side. And depending on it is literally all down to the creators and when they grew up and reflecting what they liked, and it literally goes just up and down. You can trace it back for about 70 years, just like that.
Well, it's also Tynan's own, that thing that you brought up from his newsletter. It's along the same lines now, that this is kind of their postmodern, what they grew up on, and now they're building on that. So, but I'm so here for this. Connor Hawk back in the DCU. Come on now.
Yeah, I'll be honest though. I obviously I read Action and Detective on Tuesday when they came out, because I was like, hey, I'm going to read some books, and those were the two most exciting ones.
That's weirdly early for you.
Yeah, So obviously I always skim before, but yesterday someone asked me, I think it was David on stream, he said, so how about that green bird? And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. I couldn't remember. I didn't remember the ending at all at the backup.
Oh, man.
I couldn't remember it.
Probably the most memorable thing this week.
I could have told you in a million years how that backup ended until I looked at it again today. And I went, oh yeah, Connor Hawk showed up.
He doesn't care as much as me and Matt, clearly.
No.
No, I'll be honest. Like, I have nothing against Connor Hawk, but I don't have that much of experience with him, really, compared to other characters.
So you know what that means? You know who his mom is, right?
Not off the top of my head, no.
No?
I'm sure it won't surprise me when you tell me. I'm sure I'll be, oh yeah, I have heard that. I
just wanted you to yell Shadow.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, Pete.
I'm sorry.
Let me down.
Look, I can't have an encyclopedia in my head at all times, all right? Occasionally something has to slip. Yeah, well, yeah, but Matt doesn't...
Wait a minute.
What?
Shadow's still Emmy's mom, right?
Yes?
Yeah. They're either changing some continuity here, which, I mean, given that we've not seen Connor Hawk in a while, would be easy to do.
Oh, what if Shadow shows up in the... or not Shadow. What if Emmy shows up in the tournament? What if Emmy shows up?
Yeah.
And we get brother v sister.
But that's the whole thing, right? If this is Ollie's son, but Emmy's his sister, what does that make? Oh man.
Try not to think about it too hard.
No.
Maybe there was some light retconning, just some light retconning, just to make that less weird.
I mean, uncle brothering.
Uncle brother. Does it matter more to each character who the mother is? Like, could they just, like Connor's saying, they could just take Connor Hawk and make him someone else.
I think it would be much easier with Connor Hawk because it's a lot less relevant.
Right.
Whereas with Emmy, because she was brought up still, around that stuff, I think it matters.
It would be cool, although it would be too much of one thing. Like, what if Connor Hawk's mom now is Lady Shiva, and so it's Cass and Connor Hawk are related?
I suspect they'll change one parent of Connor Hawks if they're going to change anything.
Yeah.
But they could change the father, though. It may not be.
But see, I can't for what bringing Connor Hawk, and I can't see them changing Ollie because just the contrast between him and Damien, they're too strong. Like I
think him being Oliver's son was probably the most defining thing about his the start of his character.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just kind of weird.
That would be like saying Damien's not actually Bruce's son, but he is Talia's.
Right.
I mean, I get why, but I'm saying that in terms of continuity for the past decade, like Oliver having a kid just hasn't been a thing. Not really.
Right. And I feel like they could lean into
he doesn't
that.
know about him yet, and kind of essentially redo that stuff.
Even worse, he doesn't care. Like, that's an Ollie thing. Ollie being a dirtbag, like
I would love for us to have a proper Green Arrow series while this stuff's going on, so that he can be trying to explain all this.
I wouldn't be surprised if one launches. Like, see if we get an announcement for July or August, it would not. Like, I'm all half expecting it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, just the stuff with Arsenal, and you got this now, and just there's no main series. I just can't see this playing out just
I saw
everywhere else.
The other day, Matt, that, hey, remember when Arsenal had one arm?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was a thing.
I had that thing because I started thinking about the Green Arrow, because Green Arrow was before the New 52, that was an area that I was very heavily invested in with, Green Arrow, Black Canary, and then you had Arsenal's appearances in different things, and that whole Cry for Justice, that was terrible, but I still kind of like parts of it. But, that's what cost him his arm and just all of that stuff. And then you had Cheshire popping up in there and just, it was a lot of fun. It was the JT Kroll stuff, which, again, might not hold up by modern standards, but in the moment.
I do love the Cheshire and Arsenal relationship.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so just all this great stuff happening around Arrow, but he doesn't have a main book. It feels prime, like Pete saying. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, I would suspect.
I hope so.
Unless there's just so much going on where all the stories are going to play out in the various books that the characters are in, but it does feel like it could use a central Green Arrow and Black Canary book, and call it that. It can be a pair book. Doesn't have to just be Green Arrow and title. Not that it really fundamentally changed it, and I'd argue that Black Canary was almost equally a co-star of the previous book anyway. But I think she's a big enough character at this point that calling it Black or Green Arrow and Black Canary would be a nice move. Anyway, that's the backup. Matt, what are you rating the backup?
I'm giving this an overly generous 8.5.
Whoa, Connor?
I'm giving it an 8, and I am knocking probably half a point off for that opening, just feeling like, oh, I guess we're just starting here now.
Yeah, about 8, maybe 7.5. It's weird to me because like I really like what this set up, and I think as a whole I like it. But bizarrely, because it does just because it is the second half of the story, the first half of it just being this conversation with Damien and Talia doesn't really feel like it's that. Because, like, Talia being disappointed he didn't kill someone. Like, we've done this dance, like, so much. But once you started talking about the League of Lazarus, started about the tournament, and Damien's excitement for the tournament, excitement's maybe not the right word, his need to go to the tournament. It's maybe better.
It's like what's the right word? Like, he has like a grim fascination with it.
Yes.
Like, wait, what is this thing?
Just, like there's like that 2 pages, which is annoyingly it's the 2 pages that start this half, but that 2 pages of like, oh, you're hesitating, you're not killing, and like I say, we've done all that before. Do you think it's particularly grating because it is the start here? If that was just in the middle of it, if you pasted these together as one full issue and that was just in the middle, do you think it would have bothered you as much, or do you think it has more weighting because of the presentation?
Yeah, just it definitely. Yeah, no, it definitely bothers me just because it felt like a page turner, not a cliffhanger. Because if it was supposed to be a cliffhanger, then I wanted to see more of the resolution. Like, actually, not that I want to see her like murder the dude, but just turning the page, right? And she has blood on her hands while holding the knife. I don't know. I kind of just wanted a resolution that it wasn't there. If that's a page turn, it lands a little bit better, I think, than as a full-on cliffhanger. So that's all.
Yeah. Slight formatting thing, but by splitting up. It was splitting a story that was clearly meant for just an issue into 2 halves. I actually think introducing potential new series that they want people to try this way is a really good idea. They just have to rewrite the 2 parts. If it's going to be, because it could just be 1 part, you could just do 1 10-page backup to set up a new book. Which I think this probably could have been, because the fight with the League could have been shorter, really. If they wanted to squeeze this issue into just like 10 pages, these 2 parts into 10 pages, I think it was possible.
It's paced well enough that if this was just 1 issue, we wouldn't have been saying, oh, we spent too much time on that fight.
Right.
But it feels very front-loaded because of that now, where because we're reading this like 2 weeks apart.
So I'll go with a 7.5, I think, overall. Book as a whole, Matt, Detective Comics, what are you giving it?
An 8.
Connor?
Yeah, 8 from me.
Guess I'm going 8 too, since it literally averages out to that. So there you go, Detective Comics 1034.